Rebecca Berger. This is Justice for All, where you get to hear from legal professionals in the surrounding area. Tonight we have Evan Weinstein from the Weinstein Family Law Group. Evan, welcome.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you for joining me.
It's a pleasure to be here with you, with a fellow matrimonial attorney.
With a fellow matrimonial lawyer. You've been practicing matrimonial lawyer pretty much your entire career, correct?
Yeah, I started practicing matrimonial law about 21 years ago, and that's all I've done, and that's all that I know how to do, and I enjoy it, so I'm lucky that way.
And so you actually practiced with your father, correct?
Yeah, my father started my firm. He's been in practice for 51 years.
Wow.
And when I was a kid, I never thought that I wanted to join his firm or even practice matrimonial law. Mm-hmm. Like many other little boys, I wanted to play for the Yankees. And I realized that by the time I was 9 or 10, I kind of realized that I was never going to get drafted. And so I decided that maybe I should consider other avenues, and
if the Yankees didn't work out.
If the Yankees didn't work out.
Still a possibility.
Well, you know, I'm a little old now to be drafted, but I always had an interest in law, mm-hmm. and I always had an interest in helping people, and I think that made me gravitate towards family law, because not only am I practicing law, I'm using the law to benefit my clients, but I'm helping them, and helping is what I like doing.
And we're going to talk about that a little bit more, you know, the way that you relate to your clients, because your philosophy is that help mentality. How can I help you? But do you think that your interest in pursuing the law was really, you say you gravitated, but your father's always been in law, so did you go to work with him? Is it something that you did?
As a kid, I would visit my dad.
Mm-hmm.
I was always happy to visit him at work and see him in his office and see what office life was like. I don't know why that interested me at 9 or 10 years old, but I did. And my father always would tell me that the law is a very noble profession. Mm-hmm. And it really is. It does get a bad rap, obviously, mm-hmm. but it's a noble profession. It's an honest profession. And it is a way to be of benefit to mm-hmm. your community.
So why do you think that it gets such a bad rap, in your opinion?
Because there are bad people in any line of work. Mm-hmm. And the bad people, they do bad things, and some of the bad things are really bad. Mm-hmm. And
as a matrimonial attorney, all of a sudden, I mean, until you need one,
yeah,
you're probably, you know, like, oh, you know, you just take people's money, so to speak, is the mentality, and you just want to hurt the other party.
That's never my goal. Mm-hmm. I tell my clients up front that my goal is to help them. Mm-hmm. My goal is not to take their money. And I'm very transparent with all of my billing, and I don't do certain things to make money. I do things to benefit my client, to protect their interests, and to be of benefit.
So how do you normally do that? So do you give them a certain speech when you first meet with them?
Typically, in the first meeting that I have, I will go over the bullet points of matrimonial law. I discuss concepts like custody and parenting time, mm-hmm. alimony, child support, equitable distribution of your assets, and I give them a summary of each major area. And throughout that process, I discuss certain facts about their case, which are unique to their circumstance, mm-hmm. and I'm able to give them advice that will hopefully direct them towards a positive divorce.
So what do you think are the most common questions you get asked by someone who meets you for the first time?
Aside from how much is this going to cost me and how long is this going to take, yeah. I think a couple of questions that are common are well, sometimes people will say, how will my children be after this is all mm-hmm. done? And that's a serious question. And sometimes people say, will I be able to keep my BMW? And that's not as serious of a question, but to some it's almost as important. And so you have to know how to handle different personalities.
So, did you study psychology when you were in
No.
in college?
I don't have any other degrees except for a bachelor's in political science and a law degree.
And it was just do you think it was like a foregone conclusion you were going to go to law school and end up in family law?
Well, family law, no, but definitely law school. By the time I was 10 or 11, I probably was on my path to becoming a lawyer. And when I went to college, I always wanted to go to law school afterwards, and I did. But I didn't always want to do matrimonial law. I really thought I'd be of benefit doing criminal defense work.
Why?
Well, because I thought that I could help a lot of different people, especially people that were disadvantaged. And my first summer after law school, I had an internship at the public defender's office in Jersey City. And I realized then that a lot of criminal defense work is drug cases, and I didn't have any interest in handling drug case after drug case after drug case. So in my second year of law school, I took family law, and the topic really resonated with me. And it wasn't just because I was familiar because of my dad with the concepts of whether it's alimony or custody or whatever. The concept of using legal principles to better people's lives was really, it was eye-opening to me, because in your first year of law school, you don't really relate to the subject matter. And
I don't even think you can really conceptualize what it even means.
You can't conceptualize. But so by the time I was in my second year, I had a better understanding of how certain laws work and how the legal system works. And from there, I decided that's what I wanted to do. I wanted to practice family law, and I ended up doing that.
So what do you think is one of the most difficult? So we have, typically I describe with most clients, we have, depending upon the facts of the case, usually you have child custody and child support, alimony, equitable distribution. What do you think is one of the hardest areas for your clients to understand?
Custody and parenting time, without a doubt. Why? I would say because for most people, their children are the most important thing in their lives. And people don't usually understand the concept that when people are getting divorced, the children can't be used as pawns. And too often, the children are used as a way to get back at the other spouse for doing something. And the interests of the children have to be protected, but at times during a divorce litigation, that's something that is hard to achieve.
I don't think that people fully understand. I think you have an expectation that sometimes it's, parents may not have equal rights to the children, and maybe this is traditionally mothers always have the child. Is this one of the misconceptions that you normally come into contact with?
Absolutely. I would say that very often with with children that are under 2 or under 3, that most, and I don't mean to sound sexist, but most mothers think that because that they're the mother, that the child should spend most of the time in their presence. However, in New Jersey, what was called the tender years presumption was eliminated about 30 years ago, if not more, and the law looks at parents as equals. And if you have a 3-year-old child, if you have a 10-year-old child, if you have a 7-year-old child, the law will look at you as equal parents, and the two of you should at least strive to have an equal type of parenting time. Now, there are nuances to that. I mean, for some families, an equal parenting plan just doesn't make sense for a lot of different reasons. But the courts bring to the table a certain belief that, at least in concept, that parents should share their children.
So what do you think are some of the biggest changes you've seen in the last 20 years with parenting time and custody?
Certainly, I think that that fathers have really, for the most part, I'm generalizing here, obviously, but fathers have asserted their rights in a more productive manner. And families have changed. The concept of the mother staying at home raising children is outdated. And the law has changed to reflect that. Now, there are certain people, there are certain judges that still have that mindset that a mother is better at handling a younger child, or a father is better at dealing with certain things for certain children. But in reality, because of the fact that our society has progressed in a positive way, there isn't any basis to use gender stereotypes in any aspect of custody and parenting time.
So what do you think are some of the biggest problems we still have in the system with the custody and parenting time?
I think that one of the biggest problems is that the children don't have someone protecting them. It's possible to get a guardian appointed for children, but that's not the norm. And I think that children would benefit if they had someone that was independent fighting for them. But not in such a way that would put one parent against the other, but just someone to give a voice to them. Because the divorce is happening to them too. And they need to be able to process that and have a say in it to a certain degree.
And I'm a big believer in therapy, just generally.
Yeah.
Children being in that situation, you know, for them, they don't get a choice. They're children. So you have two adults who have the capacity to understand, and you have children whose brains are not even fully developed, sitting in a situation, you know, feeling pulled between two parents a lot of times, unfortunately.
That's always very sad.
Yeah, I mean, I think
Very sad.
it definitely is one of the hardest things about what we do.
Yeah.
And
And
seeing it.
unfortunately, you do bring it home with you at the end of the day.
Yes. Yes, I think sometimes it's hard to forget about the fact that this is, you know, these children are potentially being impacted by this for the rest of their life, and you're trying to impress that upon a client, or, you know, maybe you're talking to the other attorney about like the implications
Yeah.
of what can happen.
The highs are really high. The lows, sadly, are really low. But when you do have the opportunity to really make a positive change
Yes.
for someone, that is the reward.
That's true. And you talked about how families have changed. You've actually done a lot of same-sex couples.
I've had a few same-sex couples in my career, and what I've come to realize is that a family is a family.
family.
It doesn't matter if it's same-sex. It doesn't matter if it's a heterosexual couple. It's a family, and it has the same issues. It has the same concepts, and it's certainly, I am happy that our state has progressed in a positive direction that way.
Have you seen that there have been more issues with same-sex couples and, you know, in any of the areas of divorce, in that litigation
I
itself?
wouldn't say more issues. It's just they have issues. And like anyone else, like any heterosexual couple, there's going to be issues. So I don't think there's anything that's more specific that I've seen to a same-sex couple than would happen in a heterosexual couple.
So how do you think COVID has changed some of the custody parenting time issues?
It's changed everyone. It's changed everyone, some for the better and some for the worse. Early in the pandemic, I was involved in a lot of of cases where parents would make allegations that the other parent wasn't practicing the appropriate social distancing, that the children were put in what they perceived to be danger because of a lack of taking things seriously. And that was problematic. And there were some parents that were that it was just hard to do the pickup and the drop off because of COVID, and because children were spending so much time at home doing school and just being at home. Children were really suffering, and that was impacting parenting, which just made everyone's lives more complicated.
So, I mean, I think the courts were definitely overwhelmed because you're dealing with some of these new issues that there's no precedent for.
And what I found was, at the height of COVID, that courts were afraid to change things. So the default position would be whatever was previously agreed or previously ordered has to continue. And thankfully, things have opened up and things are progressing in a positive way as it relates to the courts. But for a while that there was some stagnation, and but there was stagnation everywhere. So,
So were you coming into contact with cases where, like even this year, well, they have the option of still being remote. Well, I want my kids in school. No, I want them to be in remote, and the parents can't seem to agree.
I really tend to see that most of the cases that I'm involved in, I've had very little parents that want their children to stay home and do school on Zoom. So I don't really have that much dealings with that kind of case. And so from my perspective, it's really the kids acclimating back to being in school and the parents acclimating back to having to deal with the back and forth of taking them to school and the pickup and the drop-offs and the usual parenting issues when it comes to young children in school.
And I want to talk to you.
And attending parent-teacher conferences and all that stuff.
Which is, again, you didn't do this for like a full year, and here we are doing this again. And I want to talk to you a little bit more about what the financial aspects of these divorces after the commercial break. This is Justice for All. We'll be right back after this commercial break. Welcome back. I'm Rebecca Berger. This is Justice for All. We're talking to Evan Weinstein. Evan, so before we went to commercial break, we were talking about the custodial aspect and parenting time. Financials are a huge part of any divorce. What do you think are your biggest problems in divorces? Alimony or equitable distribution?
Well, I would say alimony would be a challenging aspect because in most cases where a spouse is going to receive alimony, that spouse has spoken to friends of theirs. And they've heard the story that my husband is paying me X or my wife is paying me X or something. And so there's always a natural comparison between friends or whatever to outdo the other. And what they don't understand is that in every case, alimony is very fact sensitive. There are 15 statutory factors in New Jersey that a court has to consider in making any kind of alimony type of award. So to say that there's any generic a way of resolving it is kind of doing a disservice to the statutory law. In practice, some practitioners are able to come up with a formulaic type of approach that makes sense for certain cases, but I don't think a formula really fits every type of case. So I believe that alimony, because it's so fact sensitive, there could be a wide range of outcomes.
Well, and I think that people expect that there's always going to be some formula. Oh, well, what's my number for alimony going to be? Well, do you get that?
All the time, all the time. And if you, what I do find, if you give someone like a number or even a range, they focus on that number and they don't understand that there are nuances and that, you know, things don't always go in a way that fits a stereotypical formula. And I find alimony to be challenging in certain cases. And obviously, in a case where there's businesses, in a case where there's complicated assets, the equitable distribution can be infinitely harder than figuring out alimony sometimes.
Well, because I think people assume, well, it's just a small business. There's no value to it.
Yeah, but it doesn't work that way. And just because people think it's equitable distribution, it doesn't mean equal. So if people think that all assets are going to be divided 50-50, they need to know that that's not the case.
And what do you think are some of the biggest factors that can affect that ability to be that 50-50?
Certainly the source of acquisition of the asset, if the asset was someone's prior to being married, if someone inherited an asset, if there's a business owner that was actively involved in making a business a success. It's those kinds of cases, those factual situations where there wouldn't be an equal distribution of the assets. There would be some other type of arrangement.
Have you had any cases where that have really changed or impacted the way that you practice law?
That's a really good question. I think that I learn from every case, and I think that throughout the years I've really learned from the failures that I've been involved in more than any of my successes. And you learn, or at least I've learned, and it's made me better. And that's pretty much, and hopefully that I can take what I've learned and continue to help others.
So is there any one particular case that you can think of that really helped you learn, because you said that this was a failure, or at least you perceived it as that, maybe not necessarily in the big picture, but maybe that was your perception?
There was one case, I was a very young lawyer, I still had some hair in my head, and I made an application to modify child support. And I didn't necessarily account for certain parts of the child support formula, and I didn't perceive certain things happening, and I should have. And I realized that I have to be thorough in my analysis from the outset. And that has forever, I guess, changed my outlook on things. And today, I always tell my clients that I'm here to do good for you. I don't want to make your life worse for you in any way. And that taught me that lesson of not being as thorough as I should have been. It really taught me a very valuable life lesson too.
Well, yeah, because I mean, you don't really know until you know.
Yeah.
Really, until being perspective is experience, experience is perspective, and that definitely changes your perspective when you're doing that. So, what common misconceptions do you think there are about family law generally?
I think that one of the biggest misconceptions would be that a divorce has to be combative. In fact, it doesn't have to be, and it shouldn't be. It doesn't have to be World War III. There's no reason why two people who at least at one point loved each other can't at least try and make a sincere effort to resolve their differences without spending hundreds of thousands of dollars and without yelling and screaming at each other, because no one wins.
Agreed. I think sometimes you end up litigating emotion as opposed to logic.
Yeah. And and look, I mean, we all have emotions, and attorneys have emotions. And sometimes you do have to manage your own emotions to give good advice to people. And that's a lesson that clients should also understand, is that there is an emotional component, but when it's all said and done, the facts are the facts, the law is the law. You have to apply you have to apply the law to the facts, and you have to make decisions. And things have to move forward. There's no reason to fight every single issue.
I think that's hard for people too,
Yeah.
when they're stuck in that battle position.
Oh, yeah.
And they're still, what I find is, if they haven't been married very long, sometimes they're the most difficult cases.
I agree, actually. Yeah.
It's
No,
almost like they
sometimes-
haven't gotten
yeah.
over the excitement of that
Yeah.
wedding, then they're in divorce court,
Yeah.
and it's almost like they haven't made that transition.
And also, when children are also very young, I find that to be challenging as well. And oftentimes, people with very limited assets choose to be as litigious as possible, largely because those assets matter more to them. And that again makes some complex cases complex.
And explaining to them, like, look, you're going to
Yeah.
spend more money talking about the spoons than you will to just purchase some new spoons.
I personally do not enjoy dealing with the distribution of people's tchotchkes and other stuff like that. That's not why I went to law school.
But you do mediation as well.
I do
so-
mediation, and certainly that there are ways to resolve those types of issues without spending tons of money and tons of time. It's just stuff, and it's going to be divided.
So what do you think some of the most common questions you get asked in divorce matters?
Aside from the cost and the length of time, I would say another common question that I do get would be, what is my life going to be like after this is all said and done? And what I like to do in that situation is I like to be as realistic as possible and tell them that they can live their best life after they are divorced, and it's on them to really make that a priority. That I will give them the tools, the legal advice to get to a certain point, but then it's on them to live their best life afterwards. And they should. People should live their best life after being divorced.
So Evan, if someone wanted to contact you to speak to you, retain your services, how would they do that?
The best way to contact me would be to call my office. My number is 973-403-6000, or you can email me. It's eweinstein@familylawNJ.com.
Evan, thank you so much for joining me. It has been a pleasure.
Thank you for having me, Rebecca.